What if the queen you picture in a silk gown and a jeweled headdress never actually looked like that? What if the most famous love stories about her are the real fiction, and her true power lay in something far sharper than a kiss? Cleopatra has been turned into a Hollywood icon, a seductive temptress who fell for the likes of Caesar and Antony. Those films paint her as a femme fatale whose beauty alone could sway empires. The reality is far more complex. She was a ruler who spoke several languages, negotiated treaties, and managed a kingdom on the brink of collapse. She was a scholar, a diplomat, and a shrewd political operator. The real Cleopatra was a mind forged in the crucible of power, not a mere object of desire. The story of Egypt's last pharaoh begins in a world where Greek and Egyptian cultures collided. The Ptolemaic dynasty, founded by one of Alexander the Great's generals, ruled a land steeped in ancient tradition while trying to impose Hellenistic rule. By the time Cleopatra VII ascended the throne, the dynasty was crumbling under debt, famine, and internal strife. The Roman Republic loomed like a storm on the horizon, ready to swallow any weak kingdom. In that chaotic landscape, a young woman took the throne at just 18. She inherited a kingdom teetering on the edge, and a court filled with intrigue, betrayal, and the constant threat of Roman interference. Her first move was not to parade herself in a golden chariot, but to educate herself beyond the expectations of a queen. Cleopatra was tutored by the best scholars of Alexandria, the city that housed the world's greatest library. She learned Greek philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and the art of rhetoric. She also mastered Egyptian language and customs, something no other Ptolemaic ruler had dared to do. Imagine a ruler in a foreign dynasty who learns the language of the people she governs, not for show, but to read the priestly texts, to speak directly to the common folk, to understand the ancient rituals that gave legitimacy to her reign. This was a strategic masterstroke. By speaking Egyptian, she placed herself not as a foreign occupier, but as a true pharaoh in the eyes of her subjects. Her linguistic abilities didn't stop there. Cleopatra was fluent in Greek, the lingua franca of the Mediterranean elite, and could converse in Aramaic, Ethiopian, and possibly even Latin. When she met Julius Caesar, she didn't need an interpreter. She could engage him on equal intellectual footing. In one famous anecdote, she reportedly answered Caesar's question about the Nile's length not with a guess, but with a precise figure drawn from her own scientific studies. She wasn't just charming, she was a scholar who could quote Euclid, discuss the works of Homer, and reference Egyptian religious texts in a single conversation. That kind of intellectual versatility was unheard of for a woman in antiquity, and it gave her a credibility that beauty alone could never achieve. Political acumen was the next arena where Cleopatra shone. When her younger brother Ptolemy XIII tried to sideline her, she didn't simply flee or beg for mercy. She rallied loyalists, secured the support of the Egyptian priesthood, and formed a strategic alliance with the most powerful man in Rome, Julius Caesar. This wasn't a love affair born out of passion, it was a calculated partnership. Caesar needed Egypt's grain, and Cleopatra needed Rome's military backing. Their union produced a son, Caesarion, a political symbol meant to cement her dynastic legitimacy. Yet, the real brilliance was in how she turned a personal relationship into a diplomatic lever. She ensured that Roman troops would protect her throne, while offering Caesar political and economic benefits that no other Egyptian ruler could. When Caesar was assassinated, most would have expected Cleopatra to retreat into obscurity. Instead, she pivoted to another Roman heavyweight, Mark Antony. Again, she used personal charm as a diplomatic tool, but this time she also leveraged her deep understanding of Roman politics. She presented herself as the rightful heir to Caesar's legacy, positioning Antony as the protector of Eastern interests. Their alliance produced another child, Alexander Helios, and a series of treaties that temporarily secured Egypt's autonomy. Yet, the alliance was more than romance. It was a sophisticated balancing act. She offered Antony a massive dowry, control of Egyptian ports, and access to the wealth of the Nile resources that would fund his campaigns and bolster his standing in Rome. Beyond the high-profile romances, Cleopatra's domestic policies were equally groundbreaking. She reformed the tax system to reduce the burden on peasants, a move that stabilized the agrarian economy and curbed the unrest that had plagued previous reigns. She invested in infrastructure, commissioning the repair of irrigation canals that had fallen into disrepair during the earlier wars. These canals were the lifeblood of Egyptian agriculture, and restoring them meant more grain, more trade, and more revenue for the treasury. She also supported the arts and sciences, funding scholars at the Library of Alexandria and sponsoring expeditions that map the Red Sea coastline. In one documented instance, she commissioned a fleet of research vessels to explore trade routes to India, a forward-thinking initiative that anticipated the later Roman trade expansion. The image of Cleopatra that most people carry is shaped by Roman historians like Plutarch and later by Renaissance painters. They emphasized her seductive qualities, often portraying her as a temptress who used her beauty to manipulate men. However, contemporary evidence paints a different picture. Coins minted during her reign show a queen with a prominent, almost austere profile, a strong nose, a determined jawline, and a crown that resembles the traditional Egyptian vulture headdress. These images suggest a ruler who wanted to be seen as a legitimate pharaoh, not as a Greek goddess. The famous Cleopatra's Needle statues, which stand in London and New York, depict her with a regal bearing, draped in traditional Egyptian attire, not the flowing Roman gowns seen in films. The Roman busts, on the other hand, often show her with a strong, angular face far from the soft, sultry Hollywood portrayal. Even the ancient writers who praised her beauty did so in a way that hints at political motive. Suetonius describes her as the most beautiful woman in the world, but he also notes that her allure was a weapon, a tool she wielded with precision. In a court where appearance could sway alliances, Cleopatra understood that her image mattered. Yet she never relied on it alone. She used it as a complement to her intellect, not as a substitute. This dual strategy, combining visual symbolism with genuine scholarly achievement, allowed her to command respect across cultures. The myth of Cleopatra as a mere seductress was amplified after her death. The Roman victory at the Battle of Actium gave Octavian, later Augustus, the power to shape the narrative. By casting Cleopatra as a foreign temptress who led a Roman general to ruin, he justified his own conquest of Egypt and painted the annexation as a moral imperative. Over the centuries, playwrights, poets, and filmmakers have leaned into this narrative because it sells dramatic love, tragic downfall, exotic allure. But the reality is far less melodramatic and far more instructive. Cleopatra's story is a case study in how a leader can harness both soft power and hard power to survive in a hostile world. In the end, Cleopatra's most lasting legacy is not the love affairs that dominate popular culture, but her mastery of narrative itself. She knew that a ruler's image could be as powerful as an army. By learning the language of her people, she built a bridge between Greek and Egyptian identities. By aligning with Rome, she bought time for her kingdom. By patronizing science and infrastructure, she strengthened the foundations of her state. And by allowing later generations to mythologize her, she ensured that her name would echo through the ages, even if the details were twisted. The irony is that the very stories that distort her life also keep her memory alive, prompting us to dig deeper and question the versions we are handed. If you could rewrite one piece of history to match the facts rather than the fiction, which myth would you choose to dismantle first?